Let's talk about mental blockades today. And mental blockades, they are basically the moment when you're gonna put into practice your language or you're gonna start speaking English or whatever, and you suddenly freeze and you're not able to speak and you're not able to understand and you start believing that you're not able to use the language and that you're not good enough for the language, and that is what happens in a mental blockade. So I don't know if you have been through this situation. Let's talk about like let's say it's a family meeting, and in this family meeting you're gonna find somebody, one of your cousins. She's married to a gringo, and then when she comes around with a gringo and you're starting to learn the language, you're starting to learn English, and you want to put what you want to practice the language, then you say, okay, the gringo arrived. And when you're going to talk to him, you just listen to the gringo say like this. So, hey, how's it going? How's work going? And then suddenly, what's the first thing that happens in your mind? You freeze. You stay like, oh, you stay blank and you say, fine, fine, fine. You answer anything that's quick enough so that you can get away and run away from that situation or that person. And guess what? It's always going to happen like that. But after you leave that conversation or after your first reaction, you're going to start thinking and you're going to be you stay on thinking and you will keep on going in your mind about like, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said something totally different. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Oh no, next time that he tells me that or that he tells me the other thing, I'm going to answer in a different way, and so on. This is very common. This is very common because you go on through the situation. It doesn't need to be in a family gathering or family meeting. It can be in a work presentation when they ask you like, who are you? And then you introduce yourself in a way that you don't think was very good. And then you say like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said something different. And that it happens. It's common. Don't worry. There's nothing wrong about it. And then we keep on thinking about this, but we don't understand where these blockades come from. And then we start blaming the language, or we start blaming our level of the language. And we say like, okay, you know what? I think that I'm not good enough in English. So that's the reason why I block or my mind gets blocked. And this is a situation that I've just told you. It's an imaginary situation. This is made up. I just made up the situation. But maybe you have had some situations where it has really happened and it's not that cool. Has it happened to you? How was it? How was the moment when you were trying to speak the language and then you didn't manage to do it? It's real. It's a situation that it's a fact that it happens, and I'm going to talk to you about how your body reacts to this. Because normally our body starts reacting to this, and these reactions can come they can manifest themselves in sweaty hands, sweaty armpits. You can start trembling and so on. And these blockades are something so common. Everybody lives them. I lived them when I was possibly 11 or 12. I was in a process of learning the language in the bilingual school, and it had 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And when we were studying that part of the language, we were in a moment of the grammar where we were learning such traditional stuff and such a heavy grammar, like names, rules, and so on, that I didn't like it. But there was one thing especially that made me block myself from the language, and was the teachers and the way I responded to them. So I would have enormous amount of trouble with my 3 teachers. In the 6th grade, it was Nubia. In the 7th, it was Fernando. And in the 8th grade, it was Rose. And those 3 teachers were the ones that made me block my mind the most towards English. And I'll tell you why. Because the approach we had, or the reactions that my body had when I was gonna talk to them or when I was gonna when I was gonna communicate with them, they were reactions of rage, or I was feeling furious, and I would start doing all these things that I wouldn't that I would manifest in saying like I don't like English and I don't like you. So that made me not look at the language as a language, but it made me think that I didn't like English, and it was not true, because later on I realized that I really like the language. Man, I love what I do. And I love the language because I understood that is the best way for you to communicate with the whole world. So this blockade, once I started getting more into the subject of teaching and neuro language coaching and so on, it became more often that I saw that, okay, why does this happen? And today you're going to learn about that. I went from hating English to starting liking it a lot. Then, if you have had these situations, what type of thoughts are in your mind? What does your mind tell you when you have a mental blockade and so on? So let's understand first what a blockade is. What happens in your mind? They are basically functional responses of two parts of your body. And these two parts, they are linked to how we learn, the way we express our things, or the way we grasp the information and so on. They're leading you towards more effective learning. And I'm talking about the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. But in this case, I'm not going to giving you a class about neuroscience or how the brain works or so on, because we're just listening, we're just practice our listening. I'm just talking to you about mental blockades, but you, in fact, must be paying attention to the structures that I use. You must be paying attention to the different time tenses or the way I pronounce the words and so on, and not necessarily to the information that I'm trying to pass you. So you are practice your listening while I'm trying to explain you a little bit about mental blockades. One of the most important parts of the body that takes a big part in it, it's called the amygdala. When we get blocked is when the amygdala, that it's a primitive part of our brain, kicks in and it gets into the action. And what it does, it basically activates in you something called the fight or flight instinct. The fight or flight instinct is that primitive instinct that we have when we think that we are in danger and that something wrong can happen to us. So for example, if you are in the street and suddenly a car starts screeching its tires and comes towards you, what the instinct that kicks in is the amygdala to make you move out of the way. It's fight. Or flight. Flight is like the fact that you escape, and fight is like the fact that you confront. But when this happens, when the amygdala kicks in, the rest of your functions, the prefrontal cortex, that is the part of your brain that is more rational, it shuts down. It basically shuts down. So what it happens is that it doesn't allow you to think, it doesn't allow you to access the information that you have in your mind, but it allows you to start, it basically makes your body react and not your mind. So when the amygdala kicks in, it's your body responding and not your brain. And that's why people block. That's why you start sweating, because more blood goes to your extremities and so on. So these blockades are basically a response from the amygdala. That's why you get blocked. And what people need to do, or what fluent people actually do in order to not feel these blockades, or not to feel frozen, or not to feel bad when they're trying to speak the language, is basically make their prefrontal cortex, or the rational part of their brain, react, start working again. And that's what you can do. There's many ways you can do it. Basically, the easiest way you can do it is by breathing. But okay, you know that right now I'm passing some information. However, you should be practicing your listening, because the intention of this whole exercise is for you to pay attention to the verbs, structures, expressions, time tenses, and all those things that I'm trying to explain to explain and to convey to you, and understanding how the language sounds and not necessarily the information. Focus on the English that I'm using and not the information that I'm trying to pass. That is effective listening practice. All right. That's why these audios are short, or these videos are short, and that's why they bring so much result, because you're trying to focus right now on the way I express the ideas and not necessarily on the ideas that I'm using. All right, my friend. So coming back to mental blockades, your part of the brain, the rational part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, will get active again once you start breathing and sending oxygen to it. But when you activate it, once again, what you'll be doing actually is telling your mind, hey, let me access all the information that I have, or all the knowledge that I have about English and so on, so I can express it to the person that is in front of me, so I can speak or so I can understand. All right, my friend. So when you're blocking, or when you're trying to block, when your mind gets blocked, it's because your amygdala kicked in with the fight or flight instinct. And what you need to do is reactivate your rational part of the brain by breathing or other exercises like the STS principle. That's the principle of eloquence, but that's something different that I talk about in other videos. All right, my friend. In this listening practice, we were discussing about mental blockades, short listening, active listening. Pay attention to the words that I used. If you want, you can go back to the audio. I try to use different speeds, different expressions, different types of structures and verbs and collocations and expressions, phrasal verbs, and so on. I made it fast, I made it slow, I made it clear, I made it not so clear. So when you pay attention to the information and to the speech and the language, you will be able to understand the information in future occasions.